نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So tonight, today, inshallah, we'll be continue discussing the book Sahih Bukhari by Zabid rahimahullah ta'ala, and in Kitab as-Salat, and discussing matters regarding a Sutra. So we had started that discussion regarding a hadith that the author rahimahullah ta'ala have mentioned pertaining to Ahkam Sutra, which is this what the person should pray towards while in the Salat. So pick up from the hadith that we had ended with last, and take up the discussion from there, بأمر الله سبحانه وتعالى.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. قال المؤلف رحمه الله. Chapter 5, to offer non-congregational as-salah between the pillars. Hadith number 317, narrated by Nafi' ibn Omar radiallahu anhuma, said Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam entered the Kaaba. I asked Bilal when he came out, what did the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam do? He replied, he offered as-salah with one pillar to his left and one to his right, and three behind. In those days the Kaaba was supported by 6 pillars. In another quotation, Malik said there were 2 pillars on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam's right side.
That's the hadith that mentioned regarding of those matters regarding as-salat al-sawari fi ghayr al-jama'. So this discussion is regarding concerning that the matter regarding praying in between columns. So the person praying in between columns. So from the hadith is to discuss this particular masala. So the author, he mentioned as-salat bayna sawari fi ghayr al-jama', and he made an exclusion of the jama'. So based upon this that they mentioned regarding concerning that not this hadith is to discuss regarding, it shows that it is permissible for a person who is praying and there's columns in the masjid, that one is allowed to pray in between them if he is munfarid. If he is munfarid, praying by himself, then he is allowed. And as we'll discuss other masal that relates to the hadith. So generally this hadith to show that the hadith that is mentioned by Ibn Omar here, he mentioned concerning the hadith of part of the hadith, not the entire hadith. So the hadith mentioned Ibn Omar that mentioned that Rasulullah Islam dakhla al-Kaaba, that the Prophet Islam entered the Kaaba, wa Usama ibn Zayd, also of those who entered inside the Kaaba with the Prophet Islam, they mentioned Usama ibn Zayd, Bilal, Uthman ibn Talha, who entered and they mentioned wa aglaqaha, and when they entered they closed the door behind. So the left Ibn Umar was out, and all others and those that were mentioned, they entered the Kaaba. Then I mentioned the Prophet Islam that he prayed inside of the Kaaba. So as we mentioned that in previous lesson, that from the hadith it showed that the permissibility of people entering the Kaaba. So the Kaaba, that it showed that one can enter into the Kaaba, and also one can pray inside of the Kaaba. As we mentioned that praying inside the Kaaba, there's no Qibla. So whatever direction a person pray, then that's his Qibla. So the Kaaba have no inside the Kaaba, that there's no Qibla. And for the mention that the Salat that was prayed was Salat an-Nafila. So the Salat that was prayed an-Nafila inside of the Kaaba. Also they mentioned from the hadith regarding the Kaaba that during that time that the columns that inside the Kaaba was 6. So you had over 6 columns inside of the Kaaba. Some mentioned things have changed, but overall then, during the time when this hadith was mentioned, that the amount of pillars inside the Kaaba was 6. Also it shows regarding concerning that the Kaaba, and also by way of masajid, having columns. So it's permissible to have columns as something to for the building itself. So it is permissible to do so, but without extravagance. Without extravagance. So it shows the Kaaba then had pillars, columns to hold it up, and also that buildings normally would do so, but in building a masajid, not to do so in being excessive in the amount of column, more so for decoration than for its purpose. Then as for the ahkam that they mentioned regarding what is mentioned by the author, that from the hadith it shows regarding Al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, that wants to show regarding that it is the permissibility of one praying between the columns, in between the columns, if you're not in a jama'. So it shows regarding the person who is praying on his own, whether salat is a compulsory salat or a nafila salat, that it is allowed. So the person praying in between columns, as I mentioned, the columns that they yaqta as-sufuf, that with the columns, then it breaks the sufuf. So that's the reason why that as the Jama, that they should not pray in between these columns. But first, the person who is praying on his own, whether a compulsory salah or a nafila salat, then it is allowed. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that also the ulama give up a permissibility. They're praying in between the columns, and you are like one or 2, 3 individual where you can make a saf and it doesn't pray between yourselves, then that is permissible. So if you have, for example, 4 individuals want to pray and they want to pray the salah between themselves, they can pray in between the saf without in this case, because that they can fit in that space, they can fit within that space, so for them it is allowed, as they're not breaking the sufuf. But as for the Jama, that behind, then with this, the ulama also, we have that discussion. So they mentioned that one, the Imam praying and the Jama behind him. That the Imam with the Jama behind him, they should not pray in between the columns. But the Imam can do so. The Imam can do so, stand in between, but the Jama behind him do not. They pray out, not in between the columns. Then they mentioned, so from this matter, they have a discussion between the ulama that, and from the hadith, it shows regarding that, that the importance of the sufuf. So from the hadith, it shows regarding that of those things regarding for the Jama is maintaining that the rows, that they are not broken. And of those things that can cause this is those columns. So to avoid this, so of the hadith, it shows one should avoid this for the Jama. And also, of those I mentioned regarding concerning of today's time, you find that in some of the masajid, that the mimbar, sometimes the size of the mimbar, it is somewhat, you have some very large one that goes at that. Sometimes that saf al-awwal, they even go through saf al-awwal. So also that to be avoided. So as for what is mentioned here regarding concerning of the ahkam that they discuss, that with this matter, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned that jumhur of the ulama take the position that praying the Jama, praying in between those columns is something which is makruh. It is disliked. It is disliked to do so. If it is done, it is disliked, but a person's salat is still valid. And the reason why it is disliked, because of breaking off the sufuf, of the rows, and keeping them unbroken. So that's the reason of the ulama mentioned that in cases where there's a need, that there's space that is needed, the place is somewhat packed, and there's space is needed, that one can pray in between the sufuf because of the circumstance. So if there's a circumstance that may arise where the masjid is packed and you have these columns that are there, then people are allowed to pray in between due to the need, due to the circumstance which is that of a need. Also from the hadith, it shows, we got to mention, fi ghadl jama, that it is disliked for the Jama to pray in between those rows, in between the columns, in between the columns. It is something which is disliked. Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, that have a position that Ahmed, that he mentions that is something which is disliked for him, mutlaqa. So you have some riwayah and Ahmed that he disliked regarding this. And that's the next matter. Sorry, that's the next matter to be discussed. So that's concerning of that matters that I mentioned, that it is disliked. Ahmed, that also about riwayah Ahmed that he dislikes it mutlaqa. So the riwayah and Ahmed that he disliked praying in between any type of salat being prayed in with the persons in between columns. So Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala have that qawl. But Al-Harb Kirbani, he mentioned that Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala that mentioned that Yaqra, that he dislikes it, whether the number is a large number or a small number. So whether few in number, he doesn't like it to be done, or whether the number praying in between is a large number. So in any cases, something which is disliked, even a number. So that's concerning the view that are taken. Then also I mentioned at Yaqra that is something also disliked, that the reason behind it being disliked because it breaks the saf. It breaks the saf. It's mentioned that Muhammad bin Sirin and also Abu Hanifa, Malik, Ibn Mundhir, that they all concerned that in the next view that labas, that they all concerned that it is labas, it is okay for one to pray in between the columns if they mention that lidayk al-masjid, or min dayq al-masjid, if the masjid comes at dayq, if the masjid is somewhat overcrowded and there's space that is needed, you are allowed to pray in between the sufuf, and it's not considered to be something which is makruh. So it becomes something which is labas. They give a rukhsa, a permit, or some form of concession that is allowed if the masjid is somewhat packed and that space is needed, then they can pray in between the rows. So that's concerned the aqwal that is mentioned regarding this particular discussion. So it shows that it is allowed for the person who's munfarid, or according to the ulama, if there's a small number of people, that they can pray in between the columns. As for the jama behind the imam, then majority of the ulama tell is something which is disliked. The salat is sahih, but they're doing something which is disliked. Doing something which is disliked. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala also have a call regarding yaqra lil imam faqat, that he owed that for the imam to pray in between, that he owed it is disliked. So you'll find a case where the imam is in between and the jama' behind. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala owed that in that case also it is disliked. Mention lil imam faqat, only for the imam, but for the jama' no. So it is what is understood, or what can be understood, that for the imam to pray in that position it is disliked, but as for those behind, la bas, according to that view. So those are the aqwal that I mentioned. So we mentioned regarding that particular matter. So that's concerning what can be taken from the hadith. So the hadith overall, that it shows the permissibility to pray in the Kaaba. The Prophet ﷺ prayed, and also others prayed along with him inside the Kaaba. So it's something which is allowed. So entering the Kaaba is allowed, and to pray inside is allowed. There's no qibla for the Kaaba. And also that from the hadith, the shahid from the hadith, that one can pray in between the columns. That the person who is munfarid. And also in cases of the imam. But as for the jama', then they are not to pray in between the columns unless there's a reason, unless there's a valid reason to do so. Then I mentioned that Ibn Omar, as is the narrator of the hadith, that when he mentioned, said that the hadith mentioned, فَأَغْلَقَهَا, that meant that when they enter the Kaaba, the Prophet ﷺ, Usama, Bilal, and Uthman ibn Talha, that they closed the door behind, and they closed the door on him. Then they asked Bilal concerning what happened when he came out. So concerned, they show the interest of Ibn Umar, wanted to know exactly what occurred regarding occurred inside while they were inside, as to so show that the level of interest regarding what they did inside the Kaaba. Then Bilal anhu explained to him regarding that what they have done. So show that not having that interest regarding from Ibn Umar as to what they did. So that's concerning that particular hadith. That concerning that particular hadith. Aywa.
Sorry, Omar, why does Imam Bukhari, he used the word as-sawari in his title heading, when in the hadith it mentions amud?
أي معنى نفس المعنى. Just اختلاف في الألفاظ. أي.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله, chapter 6, to offer as-salah, the prayer facing al-rahila, a mount, a camel, a tree, or a camel's saddle, etc. as a sutra. Hadith number 318, narrated by Nafi' ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to make his she-camel sit across, and he would offer as-salah facing it as a sutra. I asked, what would the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam do if the she-camel was provoked and moved? He said he would take his camel saddle and put it in front of him and offer as-salah facing its back part as a sutra. And Ibn Umar used to do the same. This indicates that one should not offer a salah except behind a sutra.
Hey, so these are the hadith again discussing concerning. So the hadith here discussed, this hadith is kind of somewhat to clarify of those things that can be used as a sutra. So of those things that can be used as a sutra, so you mentioned rahila, ba'ir, shajar, wa rahl. So different things that can be used as a sutra. So we have discussed before in a previous lesson regarding concern that what are those things the ulama have mentioned regarding what are the criteria or those things that would fit or can stand, what can constitute or stand as a sutra regarding the height. So they mentioned regarding concern, they mentioned al-rahla, that they use as the kind of somewhat as the measuring stick, which is this like the camel saddle. That we mentioned that of those who mentioned should be arm's length. So they mentioned those things, different things can serve as a sutra. So in this case, the hadith of is mentioned here regarding that the Prophet ﷺ, that he prays towards the Ma'akhir Rahl, which concerns the saddle. So from this they mentioned that he prays towards the saddle. Also, that's of the camel. And also they mentioned that shajar of trees are included based upon that the saddle, it is made of wood. That a saddle, it is made of wood. And if it is made of wood, then it means that a tree can serve that purpose. With me? So that's concerning that. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala kind of somewhat try to clarify regarding that different things can stand as a sutra. Some of these things are mentioned of those things regarding these are still objects, as we mentioned, the saddle that can be used. Also shajar, a tree. Also then ba'ir, even the camel, if it is still, and also other animals, and also so these things can be used as a sutra. On the matter they discuss here, that to show the permissibility, and also the permissibility of using these things as a sutra. So it's not one thing or one stated thing regarding what can be used as a sutra, but different things can be used. And also it shows the permissibility that these things that are mentioned can be used, and that the person should pray towards a sutra. That a person when praying, he should pray towards the sutra. And we discussed concerning that hukum before. They discussed a matter regarding dabba. So the ulama, they discussed regarding ba'ir being an animal. Hukum as-salat ila dabba. What's the rule regarding praying behind an animal? And taken as your sutra. Taking it as your sutra. So it is still. Can a person use the animal that is there, lying there, still, use it as a sutra? On this matter, that of the ulama mentioned that yajuz, that it is allowed for a person to use an animal that as a sutra, and as the view taken by the Ahnaf, the Hanabila. So of those who say it is yajuz, the Hanafiya, and also the Hanabila. There's a view on Malik, yajuz bihayawan tahir. So Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned the animal should be ta'ir. So is added to what is mentioned by Abu Hanifa wal Hanabila, that animal must be one which is tahir, must be clean. So that's additional thing that he mentioned. And also the animal should be still or tied down, so it shouldn't be moving. So of the criteria mentioned, the animal should be pure, and also it should be stilled and tied down. Imam Ash-Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned la yastatar, that a person should not use an animal as he mentioned that one is not allowed, Imam Shafi not allowed to use as sutra a woman and also dab.
من قال هذا؟ من قال هذا؟
Imam Shafi, that one not to use as a sutra a female, a woman, and also dabba, and animals. So for him, those two are not to be used as a sutra.
Why does he have that view when the Prophet used an animal and he used his wife?
And so that he comes to the conclusion that regarding concern of those things, the concern that can nullify your salat. So the Prophet mentioned regarding al-kalb, nam, wal himar. So those type of animals are mentioned, they can nullify your salat, and also mar'a. So you can somewhat mention if these things nullify your salat, then also they should not be used as a sutra. So that's the concept. So those are the aqwal regarding use of animals. That's the both of the Prophet use the camel as so it shows that it can be used as a sutra, as long as it is still and not moving. So from the hadith, our next matter they discuss regarding ash-shajar. So it mentioned ash-shajar. So ash-shajar that is mentioned here by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, where they mentioned is a concept that is held by some that you are not allowed to pray towards a tree. Nam, as I mentioned that because that kind of somewhat was a practice of people used to, you're like resembling those who worship of tree. Nam, so they mentioned, so based upon that, one should not. That's why Imam Bukhari means that it can be done with a person that's not, that you have regarding the tree, worshiping as and something that you mentioned, that towards a tree, if it is a tree that is used as something to be worshipped, that people go there to acts of ibadah, then you shouldn't. So if that tree, that thing is used as something that people worship, go there to do worship, then you shouldn't use it and pray in that area. Now, but the person that tree normally, now understand, and he does use it as sutra, because of, so it goes back to your intention. They just use it as a sutra, not something to be worshipped. But if that tree that is there, it is something where people go there to do acts of worship, then you shouldn't use it. Clear? So that's concerning that matter regarding, but Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala want to clarify that this matter regarding that some may have the belief that any tree, because people at times worship trees, some people, then one should not use it at all. But he showed that it can be used, based on what we mentioned that these things regarding the saddle, it is made of tree, so you can use the actual made of wood, and that wood is from a tree, so can be used. That's the logic. Something that you had mentioned last week. I wrote it down somewhere. So you mentioned about praying. Someone mentioned regarding praying in a house. That pictures filled with pictures. Hey, praying in a house with pictures. Allowed, not allowed. That's that of the ulama who mentioned that it is not allowed. Of the ulama who mention of contemporary in the past that it is something which is not allowed for a person to pray in a room that on the wall there's pictures. Now say pictures the arwa things that have souls. Now so praying in a house or in a room, but there's pictures all over the wall. That's not mentioned that you are not allowed, whether those pictures are behind or in front. Whether they're behind and in front as tashabbuh bil kuffar, as the person like resembling of those people who pray to these statues and the likes. So you see it as in that context. And those who mention that is allowed for the person, if he has no other, that it is something which is disliked to be done, but the person do so if he has no other option. But something which is disliked, be done if there's no other option. So that's concerning the person praying in that. So you find that Jumhur of the ulama say it is disliked. But of those who hold it is something which is haram to be done. Praying where pictures are there. Also you have a thing, we call it, they call it figurines, little object. You have a little, what do you call them over here? Little figurines. Yeah, so yes, ornaments where there may be of things. You might have a fish, you might have horse, and these type of thing, bird, these type of thing. So also that also the same thing with some of the ulama, that also pray in a room with those things not to be done. So that those it is not allowed, and so it is something, and those also mention it is makruh. Allah wa alam said if those ornaments that have these shapes, where these things are like worship, they're there where they are worship, then you shouldn't pray in that place or in that room. You might have some people who worship these things. So you might go in a room, just say, example, you have a picture of, what's his name? Jesus, according to them. You understand? And if the pictures, then leave that room. They go in there, do their Bible prayer or whatever. You understand? So those rooms that have those, you understand? And also pictures of that nature, and also, ornaments. You understand? If these things are objects of worship where people worship, then no.
So what about if you go in a room and it's just family pictures and stuff?
If you have options, pray elsewhere, but if not, they mention it is disliked.
What if you was in a room and they got pictures in the frames and you put the pictures down?
So the person can cover them, conceal them, then said whatever you can do to conceal them, you understand, then that's better. But the person said you have a case with a person, that one, you have other options. You have a room, but you have other options that are better. Then use that option. You have no other option but that room. If you're able to conceal, cover up those pictures, you understand, then you go for that option. If you're unable, turn them down or whatever. If you're unable because there's so many, then it is disliked. Nam then becomes the least, it is disliked. The least, it is disliked. And that's the whole Jumhur of the ulama, even though some mention no.
Is your salat still
Those who say that it is haram, none of those who mention that, that's even that you have two. Those say their salat is not valid, and those who mention yes, salat it is valid, but you're doing so what? All of that they make it disliked, or still valid, but what you do in the environment is haram.
So in airports there are multi-faith rooms, so like whereby
So this multi-faith room, you have multi-faith room in airport. Sometimes now that if there's they go to the same thing. If there's things in it, the one in Israel is only used by the Muslim though, in most of the airports. You understand? So if there's like even one that can record that the Muslims, I think the Muslims are more clean. You have the mats and all those things. The other people side, if they have objects there, they don't pray things there, then don't pray there. Now, if you have other people up there, things that are there, don't pray on that side. Pray on the side that those things are not there. Now, because in those places to remove those things can also, they'll see it as, you understand, you're breaking law and type of thing. But alhamdulillah, most of those places that most of the people use, even in malls, some of the malls here have a multi-faith room. But most of those places, is as Muslims use it. That other Christian don't, you understand, they don't pray like us. You understand, once a day, not once a month or once a week type of thing. so don't really bother with that type of thing. So go back to where we were now.
Yeah, you used to talk about don't pray in real
So instead of going back to concerns that I mentioned that praying in certain places that of things where that if there's a tree that is worshipped or used for worship, then no. So any type of that type of environment, then no. One should not pray in that type of environment where these type of ornaments or these pictures are things that are worshipped, then not to pray in those areas. It's not concerning that particular hadith. It's not concerning that particular. So I mentioned that praying on these animals, whether the animals that someone is on it or off it, the fact that it is there, that a person can pray on it, and it is somewhat still not moving. It is still and not moving, and also you can use the Sutra, and that they use as the measuring stick regarding the muakhir rahl, that the saddle that also can be used as a sutra, and anything of that height, أيوة الذي بعد.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله, chapter 7, to offer a salah facing a bed. Hadith number 319, narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. Do you make us women equal to dogs and donkeys? While I used to lie in my bed, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would come and offer a salah facing the middle of the bed. I used to consider it not good to be in front of him in his salah, so I used to slip away slowly and quietly from the foot of the bed till I got to my blanket.
As I mentioned the hadith regarding the next chapter that is mentioned here, that states regarding as-salat ila sarir, that the ulama have a discussion regarding that. Did the Prophet ﷺ, did he pray on the bed or he used the bed as a sutra? So they mentioned that. Ila Sarir mentioned as-salat ila Sarir, indicating that he prayed towards the bed. And some mention as-salat ala Sarir, that he prayed on the bed. So you have that discussion regarding this particular hadith. So general concern the hadith, it mentioned regarding Aisha anha, that she mentioned the Prophet ﷺ, that she was discussing regarding that are you equating us females with that of the kalb wal himar, in the sense of those who take the position, or some hadith regarding that, of those things that can nullify the person's salat, invalid the person's salat, is walking between the person, a female, a black dog, and a donkey. So you have hadith of that nature. You have some hadith of that nature with the Prophet ﷺ, because somewhat clearly mentioned that these things nullify the person as salah. So with that matter, so you have of those things. So she will mention, are you equating us with these things? So from this discussion, we discussed them, and so he showed the Prophet ﷺ that he prays towards a sarir, which is a bed, while she was on it. So of those who mentioned that, so it shows the permissibility of one praying towards a bed, even if someone is on it, and that person was the wife. When I mentioned she on the bed, that she wasn't moving around; she was still on the bed. So if the female is still not moving in between, then the person's salat is still valid. Is when she moves between the person and his sutra, then the salat becomes invalid according to the position taken by some of the ulama. So the hadith they mentioned that فَجِينَ بِي عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ فَتَوَسَّطْ السَّرِيرُ فَيُصَلِّي, that he came and he prayed towards the bed. So they mentioned that of the ulama, that with the sutra, if the bed is the sutra, that how high is the bed? What will be the height of the bed? Sarir bed, isn't it? What will be the height of a bed? Even our bed today. So the mattress, we call a mattress.
Yeah, mattress.
You understand, will be how high?
I think about 2 foot.
2 foot.
No, mattress. Oh, just the mattress itself.
And not the full bed.
Mattress.
Sorry, sarir means that
I'm just talking about the mattress.
the mattress.
Probably 3 inches. About 8 inches, but yeah, between 7 and 9 inches.
But then the Prophet ﷺ sleep on a bed which was propped on top of something. On the floor. It was on the floor. He had an actual frame.
Was that bed with an actual frame, or that was the bed, thus sarir, the mattress?
Just mattress.
No, when you see,
Mattress is like that.
no, but when you see,
So I said, the bed, sarir, that bed, either that bed would be with just a mattress.
Yeah.
That's what the bed is. So the situation would be that a bed with just a mattress on the floor. So the mattress on the floor. So that would be what height?
Yeah, it's about 8 inches.
You understand? So Abdul mentioned that. It showed that what is being discussed regarding that, the height of the sutra. We mentioned that with the discussion regarding what's the height of the sutra. You understand? So we said if it's just a mattress, would that mattress be, we said that, would it be that high?
No.
A standing mattress, it says on Google, is between 10 to 12 inches.
You understand? So with that, we said it's not that with the discussion between ulama as to what's the minimal height of the sutra. Remember we discussed that last week. So the ulama mentioned that, what? The arm length. So said a mattress, for example, my arm. You understand? Will it be up to there?
No.
It will be half. So you understand the line of discussion.
You said last week, you said yard, that one. Then you said from here to here. But do you see the point he's making? No.
The discussions that concern that's not the height that is being discussed. You understand? That said, if it's sarir, meaning the mattress. You understand? That mattress wouldn't reach that height that we mentioned last week. You understand? So it means that the sutra height, the minimum height, is less than, could be less than what is mentioned by majority. With me? That's the discussion. You understand? So you can someone to open that so that's the discussion. One person said that the sutra must be, remember we used this last week, or something similar. Similar, because the same side Batu said, that if the sutra is about this height, is it sufficient? Some said no.
So now it's a probably
But
yes
now,
It's a yes now.
So, so that's something to open our eyes in the discussion. That's the point. Now, also from that issue, the hadith of the Prophet consider if a sarir is just a mattress that that he live a very humble life. Live a very.
to mention, but I'm kind of scared to say. But in the hadith that said that the Prophet his mattress was very thin to the point where he was living more than his body.
Hey, I'm saying that is what I'm saying that yes, I'm saying as for the thickness is the next discussion. But if it was even said the mattress of the one that we have today is still a humble person to have. For a person that he lives in a mattress today, you understand? People see it as your miskeen, isn't it? A person that's not asleep on a mattress, people see as a miskeen. You see it, miskeen, a person like
With no bed.
yeah, but no, it's a mattress. People see it as, you understand, a miskeen. You understand? You live off a people floor. You understand? As people kind of somewhat will look down on a person who sleeping this way. You understand? But the Prophet said if the sarir was just a mattress, you understand, regardless of the thickness, that it showed that level of humbleness. But also you find that, or so living a humble lifestyle, you understand, not too extravagant. Even concerned the way that we said, the thing that we sleep on. So said even if they said the sarir is one who said, well, we know it as today, that the bed with the frame and the everything. You understand? That even with those things, and something that try to be modest, but I would say use the word but comfort, whatever comfort, but don't go over the top regarding these things. That the bed head have so much value. You understand that? But to be modest, the shahid, the Prophet his lifestyle was somewhat modest. His lifestyle and what he had in his house was somewhat modest. There was the next matter to be discussed regarding the matter of the shared hadith regarding that Aisha anha, she mentioned that us the woman being compared to that of the donkeys and the and the himar, donkeys and dog. So between the ulama, you have a discussion regarding those things that nullify one's salat if they were to go in between the person and the sutra. So what are those things that if they were walk in front of you or go in front of you while you're praying, that they could nullify your salat? So of those matters they mention that those things that you have aqwal of the ulama. The first of those views regarding of those things that can nullify your salat. One, yakta salat, la yakta salat shay. Nothing nullify, invalidate your salat. So anything that goes in front of you doesn't nullify your salat. Nothing. Whether a woman, dog, cat, whatever. Himar, nothing. So anything that goes in between you, pass in front of you while you're praying, it does not nullify your salah. A person, a man, a woman, a child, it doesn't do anything. Or animal, it doesn't do anything. And that's the view taken by Jumhur of the ulama. That's the view taken by Jumhur of the ulama. So a bulk of the ulama is of the position that nothing nullify the person's salat, regardless.
You have sutra.
Aims at that between him and his sutra, between him and his sutra. So say the case between him and his between him and his sutra. So that's a call taken by Jumhur of the ulama. And of the Sahaba that mentioned of that view, they mentioned Ali ibn Abi Talib, also Uthman ibn Affan, and Ibn Omar. So among the Sahaba who take that view, Ali, Uthman, and Ibn Omar, that take the position that nothing nullify the person's or salah. And they mention a hadith, the Prophet that mentioned hadith, mentioned la yaqta salat shay. In the hadith, it mentioned hadith in Abu Dawood, where the Prophet mentioned la yaqta as-salat shay. And they mentioned that shay an-nakira fi siyaq an-nafi, that they mentioned that nothing nullify your salah. Nothing nullify your salat. So they mentioned that the hadith that is mentioned here, that is a narrating that hadith, whose name is Mujadil ibn Sa'id Hamdani. Mujadil, Ibn Sa'id, Hamdani, that they mentioned that Jumhur of the ulama, that al-hadith, all that person is da'if. Nam, so that all that person narrates is da'if, so they mentioned the hadith is da'if regarding this statement that is the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that the Prophet ﷺ supposed to have said that nothing nullify your salat. So but that is of the evidence used by Jumhur. And also they use the hadith that we just mentioned regarding the Prophet ﷺ praying with Aisha on the bed. Nam, so that's of the evidence that they use to come to their conclusion. Then a second opinion on the matter, so another opinion of the ulama on the matter, that أنه يقطع الصلاة ثلاثة أشياء, that three things nullify the person's salat. Only three things. That I mentioned those three things, that they're al-mar'a, baligha, himar, wa kalb, aswad. These three things: a woman, a himar, donkey, and the third, a black dog. So they mentioned from this hadith that these are the things that nullify the salat. Where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the hadith that he stated in the Sahih Muslim, يقطع الصلاة المر المسلم, that the Muslim salat is nullified. That they mentioned إذا لم يكن بين يديه مثل مؤخر الرحل, that if there's nothing that in between him, المرأة والحمار وكلب الأسود. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the person's salat is nullified if the person does not have a sutra, and that person came in between you and your sutra. Your salat is nullified by way of a woman, a donkey, and a black dog. And he mentioned fihi kalb al-aswad shaitan, that the black dog is said to be a shaitan. So that's, but those are three. Of those who take this position, that we have Anas ibn Malik, Ibn Omar has been authenticated on both those two Sahabi, Anas ibn Malik and also Ibn Omar, that they take this position. And also Ata, Hassan, Ibn Jurayj, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ahmed fi riwayah, and also you have Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, and also Ibn Hazm. So those are the ones who of the view that these three things nullify the salat. So we have Ibn Umar, Anas bin Malik, we have Ata, Hassan, Al-Basri, Ibn Jurayj, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ahmed fi riwayah, and also of the Hanabila, that Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, and also Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri. Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri. And they use the hadith in the Sahih Muslim regarding how they came to that conclusion. The third opinion, yaqta salat kalb al-aswad wal mar'a hahidh, that they mentioned that the thing that nullifies salat is two things only: a woman and also a black dog. So we said that so if any other color dog, the dog is brown, whatever color, white, the person's salat is not nullified. Only if a black dog. Only if a black dog. So this third opinion take the position that these two things, a woman and also that so I mentioned al-marat al-ahidh, that ahidh, if she's on her menstruation, so it doesn't mean that if she's actually on her cycle. So I mean that a woman that is going through her menstrual cycle, if she was to go between you and your salat is invalid. So that needs to be verified. I don't mean why. Marat al-ahid, I mean a woman who's above the age of puberty, or she actually in her cycle. But overall, regarding of those who take this position, you have Ibn Abbas, and also a narration on Ata. The fourth opinion, yaqta salat kalb aswal faqat, that those who mention that the thing that nullifies a person's salat is only a black dog, based upon is a shaitan. So that view, all concerning that, of that view, there's a call of Ahmed wal Ishaq that take of this position. They do not include a woman and also himar. They do not include woman and also himar. Based upon, you find some hadith in Abu Dawood, that Abu Dawood rahimahullah ta'ala in his Sunan, he mentions some hadith that some hadith it exclude a woman and some of the hadith it exclude the woman. So you have some hadith, but they're under some. So you have some hadith that exclude woman, and some hadith exclude. We said himar. Nam in the Dawood. So those are aqwal of the ulama on this particular matter. Of those all that, the second opinion is the more correct, based upon the explicit hadith in Sahih Muslim. So they mentioned the hadith in the Sahih Muslim, explicit on this matter, very clear regarding the Prophet mentioned that of the thing that nullify your salat, yaqta al-mar al-muslim, salat al-mar al-muslim, the person's salat is nullified if he doesn't have anything between him and his sutra, if these things were to go by, pass in front of you. Naam? So I said if those things were just there still and didn't go by, they do not nullify your salah. Eh?
The dog is majority black, but it's got a little bit of white chest, white hair on his chest. Still, or does it have to be completely black?
Hey, Aswad.
Okay, cool.
Hey.
It's got a little bit of whiteness.
Hey, Aswad. We'll double check about
Some dogs are completely black, but they got white chest hair.
hey, you have look at some white patches. Hey. Hey, inshallah, we check that one. We check that one, inshallah. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So, inshallah, because that's so, that's of the masail that is discussed regarding the hadith is mentioned, based upon the statement of Aisha, that so of those things regarding that one can use a bed to pray towards and use it as a sutra. Also, if there's someone on it, so Allah mentioned that. I didn't mention Aisha upon the bed. They mentioned also you find that if another person on the bed would be even their child. Now, so if anyone on the bed, anyone else on the bed, then that doesn't nullify the person's salat or affect the person's salat, as in this hadith mentioned. So it shows regarding that so that this shows praying towards a bed, the one being on it in the direction of the Qibla. And also the Prophet that this salat will be salat al-nafila, that you like to pray salat al-nafila inside of the house. You like to pray salat al-nafila inside of his house and also with his family. So that inshallah ta'ala will end for today and continue next week. Wabillahi ta'ala tawfiq.